everyone joining us today for our third session of the Travel Program Adoption Series being offered by SCTEM. My name is Liz Downs. I'm happy to be with you all today, moderating an amazing group of panelists who've been with us throughout these sessions. Our first one was a roundtable where we kind of tried to gauge the existing state of affairs for the clients attending these sessions. And then the first session was how to go to leadership with the idea of mandating or creating stronger enforcement, if not that explicit term mandating in higher ed. So the focus of our second session was on presenting it to leadership and getting buy-in. The session today is focused on our travelers. How do we convince our travelers to utilize our systems and tools, or how do we operate if we are lucky enough, as some of the schools on the panel are, to be under a mandate? So let me introduce our panel real quick and we'll dive into the session. We have Camila Munoz. Camila is with the University of San Diego. We have Lainey Armstrong from Tulane University. We have Shannon Miller from the University of Colorado. We have Crystal Timmerman, who's joined us from Anthony Travel. And we have Liz Dressel, who is with us from the University of Wisconsin. And again, I'm Liz Downs. I'm with Huron Consulting, and I get to work with higher ed clients on their T&E programs and systems and options. And I've been doing that for the last 8 years. So happy to work with the crew we have on here today. Let's get started. So we wanted to start off with the first question of, what is your marketing approach for travelers? And we do see this operate a little differently if we're talking about schools who are not focused on adoption, but instead are more in a mandate environment and focusing on. Liz, why don't you tell us how that works?
Sure. So for us at the University of Wisconsin, we've been mandated for quite some time now. So it's definitely been an evolution from going from when we first kind of brought the mandate out to where we are today. I think at first we did market a lot more to the travelers on the benefits of the program and the reasons why, right? So there's the cost savings. If I was to market it today, I would definitely hit on duty of care first, obviously with COVID. But I think some of the other things that we've just kind of had is it's just really switched from probably a little bit more of a marketing and explaining why at first to now it's accepted a little bit more generally. And now we still have some information out there, just less on the savings and more around information on and making sure that information gets to the travelers. And so they are aware of the policies from the very beginning and making sure they have all the information on how to make sure to book with the program.
So when you think about, have you gotten your travelers using your system or not? Do you talk about it at the University of Wisconsin in terms of adopting your tools, or do you talk in terms of compliance?
We more hit on the compliance side of things. So we really audit every expense report and make sure that each of those airline tickets were booked through the travel agency in order to be reimbursed. So we look at it probably more so from a financial perspective and an audit perspective to make sure that people are being compliant. But then we do really try to work back with all the institutions and the employees just to make sure that they are getting told of the rules and that they're very clear.
Perfect. As you guys have questions to these, I apologize for my lack of housekeeping. I'm so excited to talk about the content, but there's a Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and you guys don't wait till the end. If you have questions real time, please put them in there. I'll try to remind you about that a couple times as we get talking. Thank you. All right. So thank you, Liz. We appreciate your feedback on that program. Lainey, how's Tulane handling things?
Well, like Liz, we have been mandated for quite some time, but we had a compliance issue, even though our adoption was pretty high from a lot of our marketing and positive reinforcement, but we had no consequences. So after 2020, we really shined. Our program really did to the provost, and they saw, how important this was for the university. So now we do have consequences. but I'm still in the customer focused selling mode. I kind of go at it that I don't want them just to have to use my program. I want them to want to use it. And the reason I feel that way is because then you have happy travelers, not people trying to cause problems or, that kind of stuff. And I'm sure we all feel that way. So I do a lot of messaging. I have 2 groups that I message to. One group is university wide, and that's when I have big announcements, big discounts, new corporate contracts, things like that. And then I have another group that's primarily admins, and it's a group of 300 and it's voluntary. And then I communicate with them on a more regular basis. Not good at newsletters, so that's just my way of doing it. And so that's kind of where I am right now. I do the same thing as Liz. We work very closely with accounts payable so that if something comes across that wasn't booked through our program, now that we do have consequences, I will reach out to those people individually. If necessary, I can, bring in their upper management. But I still, in that email, will tell them why I want them to use the program, why it's good for the university, and why they want to use it, and why it's good for them. And I'm sure that we all do that as well. So I'm not as far along as Liz, but I'm getting there.
Moving towards less marketing and more follow what we're teaching you. Great. Shannon, we've got at the University of Colorado. So technically not mandated, but a very high adoption. How are you getting there?
The main focus for us is managing to the compliance of the policy, right? So like what was previously mentioned, we have updated our workflow for expense to actually flow through to our travel staff. So we 100% audit anything that's considered an internet airfare or outside of program purchases. And if it isn't compliant, then what we're doing is we're using that as an opportunity to share the information with the individual traveler. We've noticed since we've started doing this, we implemented that about 2 years ago, and we've noticed that we can kind of keep our finger on the pulse and understand that most of the time what we're seeing is people that just haven't been educated on what the policy is in the first place. So when we use that, taking it outside of payables allows us to have a more intimate conversation and an educational piece to the employee that we're dealing with, rather than it just being a hand slap and don't do it again or else you're not going to be reimbursed. So that's the main way that we deal with the compliance piece of it. And in that communication, we really are encouraging people to see the value of the program and to make sure that they're doing things like adding their loyalty information to their profiles to make sure that we at the University of Colorado allow people to keep all their points and mileage. So we really are encouraging that to kind of make that due diligence be something that is also what's in it for me, for the traveler. So that's kind of like the main things that we're doing at University of Colorado.
So when you say what's in it for them, what are your top few on that list? What's the top few?
The first thing is giving back to the traveler, right? We understand that a lot of times you're putting in your own personal time for that. So that's why we let them use all of their own loyalty rewards that they're gathering for their business on the personal side. We're also definitely promoting duty of care. That's our number one thing. It's understanding that when you're booking through the program, we have visibility into where you are, to where if anything goes wrong, we have the ability to help you. And then also just highlighting what the travel manager can provide to you as a service, right? Because we are a service center. So if anything goes sideways for that individual doesn't have to try to manage the process of getting a ticket refunded or having a credit added to their car rental or dealing directly with the hotel. I mean, these are huge things that people don't consider as part of the travel program, but it really is. I mean, that's what my job is. My job is to be the liaison for these individuals to make sure that they have a pleasant traveling experience.
So we would love to talk to our travelers about only the benefits, but we often find that they only respond to doing what we've asked them to do through consequences. Lainey, what are some of those consequences? We're seeing those questions in the Q&A chat right now. Let's give them a few examples.
So if we find someone booked outside of the system or without prior pre-approval, we give them a warning, one warning now, and that's it. And we tell them that if well, first we tell them we have to escalate this to their dean and the provost just to make it look like even more of a big deal. And then they decide whether they're going to reimburse, and then that's it. That's their last chance. They've been warned, they know the policy. We understand people do things not to be, doing it wrong. They just don't know, or they just didn't read the emails. So.
And Liz, what's an appropriate exemption of when they would be allowed to not use your travel tool?
For us, it'd be like the obvious one would be if you're going to a country where you can't book that through our agency. It used to be Cuba for us, where our agency just didn't issue tickets to Cuba. So that would be an exemption for us, or if it's athletics, for example.
And Shannon, one more to you. If they do procure something outside of the system, is there a procedure, an evidentiary procedure to prove to you why that could be an allowable exemption?
We don't usually do that up front. So that's the secondary piece. So if we're communicating with the individual, this was not booked within the program parameters, this is how you need to do it in the future. Typically the response we get back is, sorry, I didn't know, I won't let it happen again. But if somebody does present to us that there was a reason behind it, we still keep that first time in check unless they've actually proven that there's an exemption to the policy. Like if they went to our TMC, for example, and the TMC told them, we're unable to book this for you, so our recommendation is for you to book this on your own, then we would see that as an exemption, and we would go ahead and let them know that that's not going to be held against them. But for the most part, we're seeing exemptions on the front end typically. So we're being pulled into the conversation when that exemption may apply rather than after the fact for the most part.
Long-running successful program gets it on the front end. Nice to see that happening. How long have you guys been operational? Just so the newbies out there don't feel like they should be there right now.
So we onboarded with a travel program in 2011.
So some of this you get to polish up over time.
Yeah, and I would say for anybody that's new out there too, what we've really done is looked at our high volume departments and really made those connections with them and built those relationships, because once you have the buy-in and you have the understanding from your big departments, they share the information when they have in-person meetings, or if somebody's coming to them to ask them how they do things, then they're sharing that information and they become your allies in all of this.
I love that. So Crystal, let's look at it from the TMC perspective. When you're speaking to clients, what benefits do you see that the traveler has available to them when they book through our tools or with an agent?
Well, obviously we've heard it and we'll continue to have the conversation around savings, but savings really is key. And what do we all, I guarantee you, everybody on this call, if you're a supplier or you're a travel manager or you're just a frequent road warrior, you've probably heard or even said, oh, I bet I can find it out there cheaper. But can they really? And that's one thing that Anthony Travel has done, is really incorporating the specific airline agreements, the hotel negotiated rates, consortiums. And again, we'll dive into that a little more. But when you get to the traveler's level and you really talk to them like, hey, if you are out there and you are finding it cheaper, let us know. We want to work with you. We obviously all talk about how, conference rates aren't loaded. We get that. But if there's something else, we want to hear it, getting down to your traveler and letting them know savings is key for the overall university. But if you're finding something else better out there, why is that? Listening to your travelers. Then you're going to look at your unused ticket management, removing that nightmare for many of us, including from an agency standpoint. Now, we don't know, or many travelers don't know, if you're going to a UATP, if you have enough funds, or, is their profile updated with the accurate information? Or if they don't have really a solid agency partner, are they left with management of that unused ticket? Understanding those rules and expiration dates have changed frequently, knowing if there's a waiver tied to it or not. So eliminating that too, that frustration for the traveler. And speaking of frustration for the traveler, partnering with a strong agency, you're leveraging your support with your suppliers, you're stepping in, you want it to be smooth and seamless, because especially post-COVID, travel is going to generate a lot of questions. What's required? What documentation? Do I have to have a vaccination? That alone is adding more stress to our travelers than ever before. So that's really some of just the top 3 that I can think of that are really beneficial to your travelers. And when you, again, communicate to your travelers, share this information, you're putting them and their nerves and, confusion again of what to expect with the new post-COVID travel, putting that aside and really listening to them. That's key. And that's really where you see your program is growing organically. And you don't have to necessarily stand over them and police your policy. They want to book within the program because they know that you're behind them, both from a university standpoint and with your solid partnership with your agency.
That's service and support. We have a lot of anecdotal stories across this whole audience and of course on this team themselves. So-and-so was stuck, right? And I called my agent and I was on the last available seat on the flight out within 15 minutes versus I stand in the line and it's 3 days later before I can get out of the city. So those are always the winning stories. We bring those forward. I think that's part of most of your marketing approaches is some of your storytelling on how it can be helpful to individuals and how other people have gotten value from it. That other big financial incentive, let's move into our next question. That was a great overview. Thank you, everyone. Of how those unused tickets, not only is it a benefit to the traveler to be able to repurpose their tickets, to adjust, to have to change for personal and professional reasons in their schedule, right? But for the university, the challenge of not having compliance for the unused tickets was immaterial financial impact for some folks. Carolyn, I'm going to tell your story on your behalf real quick, but Carolyn's part of Blankenship, part of the SCTEM committee who helped facilitate and schedule and get all these calls going. And Carolyn, I won't get these numbers perfectly precise, but they have about 30% adoption of the in-program booking. And they had 900,000 in unused, unused tickets that came back to them. When they extrapolate from there, there's the potential that there's 1.8, right, in the bucket of not in our program. So are we responsible for making people whole if they didn't purchase in program? How do we repurpose those tickets, put them in a pool so first come, first serve can get at them? Those kinds of efficiencies that Anthony and others are offering and the ability to renegotiate, extend deadlines, be able to use those unused tickets in a very efficient and effective way as soon as we're able to travel again. And without that, financial consequences were significant, as I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. Lainey, talk to us about how your unused tickets were able to be managed.
Well, I think unused tickets is the one of the most important issues of the program. We can't expect our admins and our faculty to be travel managers to understand all of the airline rules and what the deadlines are and all of this kind of stuff and to track it. Basically, if someone's an admin for a very large department and one person cancels tickets, are you really going to expect that person to track that person down and make sure they do the right thing? We're reimbursing them for personal expenses, possibly for these unused tickets, and then we lose them because no one's tracking them. There's no transparency. You know, I can't even imagine, I'm scared to imagine all of the money the university has lost prior to having this program. And so that's one of the most important. Actually, before the pandemic hit, we were about to do a use it or lose it program at Tulane. So we were just getting that off the ground when the pandemic hit. And I really had no idea about what a UATP was or how I was going to consolidate all of these tickets. How was I going to manage all of these individual tickets in individual names? And then the university having to put cash up to pay for the portion of the ticket that, you know, that it's lacking. So if it's a $300 ticket and we're buying a $500, now we're putting cash out there. So just working with the airlines and the TMC and figuring out the best possible way to do this was a godsend. I can't even tell you. And that's when it's really important too, to work with your other departments like AP and finance, because we made the departments whole. We didn't want the travelers to be upset that we just took all of their credits and they got nothing in return. So working with finance, we were able to track all of that, go back, make their budgets whole so that we could use these $550,000 worth of unused tickets on a first come, first served basis without upsetting anyone. And then we just bill it back to their budget once they purchase it. So yeah, it took a lot of work and just working with departments and airlines and the TMC, but we made it happen and it's working great. We're not having any issues at all.
That pool is a really interesting concept and came to light pretty powerfully during COVID in terms of needing a mechanism to do such a thing. Usually a onesie twosie kind of challenge in managing unused tickets, and instead it was a tidal wave. So lots of fun. Camilla, how did you guys wade through this one?
So University of San Diego is a little bit different than all my colleagues on here. We actually are newbies. So in the beginning of 2020, so the end of December, January is when we implemented Concur Travel and Expense, which also tied a contracted travel management agency, CTP or CTM. With that came the airfare requirement. So if you saw the other series, we require airfare. If not, it's not reimbursed. And that includes all airfare that comes out of USD funds, not just employees. So we had an interesting challenge because we had already recognized that unused tickets was potentially a really large thing that we were missing out. We saw other universities that were leveraging this. I don't even know how much money we have lost over the years. So I'm glad that USD took the position of embarking in this. So we had about 2-3 months of travel for a limited portion of the people that were at the university. There were some people that chose to onboard early. So they would use our agency by calling in and emailing. We centralize the fees, so no one sees the fees. I pay them on my one card, and that helped a lot of the adoption and kind of gauge people to use the system. So with unused tickets now in the system, both for my travel agency and Concur, I can leverage communication. And so that's really helpful for our users. And we have relationships with all the airlines. So if a user no longer works here, we already paid that ticket. So we want to change the name so that someone else in that department can use it. We haven't implemented use it or lose it. We still give a lot of authority to our budget administrators because they work very well for us. We give them that type of autonomy to let us know, okay, this person doesn't work here anymore, so-and-so can use this ticket. For Southwest, because we're a smaller university, we felt like we couldn't use UATP cards because they're usually associated with fees and we didn't have as large of a spend. But to Crystal's point, never believe that you're just small. We went to the airlines and we were able to get Southwest with no fees, which was very helpful for us because it's one of our leading airlines and a lot of our tickets were used there. We didn't make university departments whole. We communicate with our TMC, so our TMC knows the individuals that have those amounts. And so whenever they need to use the ticket, they'll have to call into an agent to use that ticket. So the travelers are super happy. We communicated with the budget admin and the travelers saying like a quick frequently asked questions. How do I access my ticket? Do I have to do a journal entry? No, those were last fiscal year funds. What if I don't feel comfortable traveling? Or what if it was a student that graduated? How to make the process more easy to have a different traveler into the system. So I think it was very well received for us to start to do that. So it was a little glimpse into seeing how the program can leverage for years to come.
Great. Crystal, can I have you jump in on the TMC side and talk to us about some of the success stories you saw with unused tickets?
Yeah, so let me first start off again, kind of being repetitive, but understanding that everybody on this call could be at a different phase of your travel program, could have different volume, different needs, different objectives. So from the agency perspective, it's key that we listen to each and every one of our clients individually. Camilla may, again, reference a Southwest issue where Lainey has the funds to support UATP, where Shannon or someone else may only want to focus on these tickets as unused tickets. Everyone is unique and everyone's different. There's really not a right or wrong way, as long as you're looking at what's best for the university as a whole. So number one is looking at an automated solution. Again, removing you as a travel manager or somebody that's having to police your unused tickets, but having a solution in place that allows you to update periodically or as it evolves with the airlines, making sure that the expiration dates are accurate, or possibly disabling notifications if that information is inaccurate. Maybe it's changing, it's fluid, as we all know. But again, having the solution that will allow your travelers to have visibility to unused tickets, or, working, if you are a larger university, on implementing or configuring the site to utilize the form of payment of a UATP. That's another thing to consider. But also from the agency standpoint, and I keep mentioning this, but we do want to listen. Because when you're looking at consolidating these funds, we want to make sure that you're using them responsibly. And let's talk about, Camilla mentioned, or maybe it was Lainey, that, in the event that you have a traveler that leaves the university, what's the best way to use those funds? Making sure they're used responsibly, and that, we don't let those expire. That's one key phrase. I know my colleagues are probably rolling their eyes right now, but, we constantly say no expiration of these unused tickets or these funds. Granted, there's going to be these scenarios, but that's really our motto, is making sure that nothing expires, that our current clients aren't putting new money out there. Let's use these funds that we have. And again, I spoke to it. Not everybody has a end-to-end solution, but that's key when we're trying to get all this information to your travelers. You may be heavy on Concur, for example, and you have an agency that's working with you and updating that information, but also making sure that your agent-assisted transactions are following the same pattern. Do we need to look at the next unused ticket that's set to expire to apply that to a fund? Does your traveler understand that for a UATP, it's, how to expense it on the back end? So it's an ongoing, I always say this, ever-evolving conversation. And especially as we move through travel, we got to look at how to update your information quickly, most effectively, and then communicate this to your travelers so that these funds can be used and not expired.
Great. Thank you for that, Crystal. What are some of the financial benefits of the individual college or department using the travel program? Lainey, in terms of things, discounted rates, waivers and favors, transfer tickets, right? All these kinds of things we know exist in the market. Certainly your overall contracts for rates. But how do you bring that financial benefit forward in your environment?
Well, we do a number of things. Again, communication is really important, but again, we like to pick out some departments that are frequent travelers, athletics, admissions, different things like that. And I do travel to the departments because I find that they really don't know what they don't know. So, we've had discounted parking at the university since I've been there. It was only like $5.98 or something to park at Park and Fly across from the airport. And so when I put that on my website and I started doing my rounds around the university, spreading the word and talking to people, no one knew. I couldn't believe it. And I had the person from Park and Fly call me and go, "What happened?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "We went from like doing $50 a month to like thousands. Like we're running out." It was just unbelievable. So all of those years that they could have been, using that to save money. It's very expensive to park at the airport here. And they just weren't utilizing our discounts. And it's really important too for safety. If you want to talk about duty of care, our biggest liability is with rental cars, because you have your employees driving those cars. And if there's an accident, we're part of that. So you really have to be careful in those contracts and how you're communicating that. I put it out of policy for our travelers, if they don't use our 2 contracted rental car companies, we make them buy the insurance, things like that they just don't know. So other things is we meet with the big departments and we talk about the discounts that they're getting. We've given thousands and thousands, I would say probably over like $75,000 worth of free flights to several departments throughout the university. So we just kind of pick, you know, all right, we did athletics, now we're going to do, you know, the people who are trying to get money and, you know, advancement, and now we're going to do admissions. And that goes a long way when you hand them $20,000 worth of tickets and say, hey, use this for your travel this year, you know. They appreciate that. We sent the band to a football game on free tickets because they couldn't get the money. And so that kind of, there was a little story that went out about that, how the band were all able to go to this very important game because of the travel program. So but the discounts and the service behind it, the transfer of tickets, the waiver of favors, those are the things they appreciate the most because they're not losing those funds.
Great. In that list of stuff, Crystal, what else, you know, what kinds of things are available to universities?
Well, I don't want to harp on travel waivers and favors, but to kind of piggyback on what Lainey said, you know, your travelers don't know what they don't know. And that's a key statement that I think we can all speak to. So when you're looking at a traveler in today's environment, let's say that doesn't have the support of a program behind him or her, they're by themselves when they're arguing or trying to fight through, you know, a missed flight or a no-show of a hotel. That's one traveler. So when you're partnered with an agency and have a solid program behind you, we're taking that frustration away from the traveler. We're really leveraging our supplier partnerships. And I can't tell you how many times, and I know there are many of our airline partners on this call, that pre-COVID, if I had a traveler that called and said, hey, I booked outside of the program, my response was always, look, if you didn't book within the program, there's really not a lot of support. You know, you're going to have to call Expedia or Priceline or whomever it may be. And I understand that's frustrating. But one way that we've really shined, and I know many of my agency peers can probably attest to this, is that, you know, you're seeing now the value behind this program. And being able to step in and help these travelers. You know, we had a client that they booked an international ticket directly on a consumer site, and we were able to help them. And that traveler was so gracious. But, you know, those are happening now more than probably ever before. And obviously, you know, we'll see patterns in the industry where, you know, we step in and save the day, that I love to say, but really, you know, communicating back to your travelers, you know, and if I'm being honest, looking at, you know, from an athletic standpoint or, you know, upgrades for those coaches or whatever it may be, those are key when your traveler likely will not get them without the program or a partnership with the agency on the back end. Again, talking about having a solid agency behind you and really leveraging all of our partnerships and our spend to really go out there and fight for your travelers and your program as a whole.
Thank you. So what I gleaned away from those last couple of questions was a good bit around the unused ticket management and the service and support, which ties back to one of the questions we saw in the Q&A of your TMC fees. Do you book those centrally? Do you distribute them? As a general feedback, most of the schools I work with distribute those charges with the purchase of the travel. So if there's a booking fee for airfare or hotel or the entire trip, however it works, it comes through and the traveler reconciles it. I do have a few universities I've worked with who have held it centrally. But I would say the service support and unused ticket argument would be the most common way to say we are getting value for this $8 online booking or this, you know, $16, I'm throwing out sort of ballpark figures for the agent booking, right? That there's real value for that. We're not being charged for nothing, and it really does support us, and it's worth paying it. And we distribute it and let it live where it lives. You can keep it at the center if you feel like culturally it's going to be such a prohibitive thing that you can't get buy-in because they've got an $8 fee on there for booking online. So work through it as appropriate for your culture. But the most common scenario is it's distributed. It flows with the tickets purchased or the itineraries purchased, reserved. I'm also seeing questions, which I'd love to kind of Q&A, Shannon, pull you in here. But are asking, are we just mandating airfare? Or are we also thinking about hotels and cars?
So our hardest policy is around airfare. However, we do have some policy built around car rental as well. Just because, as Lainey mentioned earlier, there's that component of that risk factor for people booking with another car rental agency that doesn't provide the same insurance benefits. So with those ones, we really kind of manage that because we do not reimburse for somebody adding insurance to a car rental. So we're just kind of managing to what we want people to do based on what we're seeing that they're doing that we consider out of policy, since we don't have a hard mandate for anything. As far as hotels are concerned, we see that between 75 and 80% of our hotel bookings are around either a group that's booking that has to stay at a particular location, or it's conference hotels. So we're never going to get into the space of mandating hotel, just because we understand that so much of that, I mean, the university as a whole would lose so much money by not piggybacking on those conference type of fees that people are getting. So we won't go into that. It doesn't look like.
Yeah, my experience, if you're trying to write a policy that says you must use our agency or tools, has to be qualified with a when possible of some semantic, right? We have to leave the gate open for the things we know we cannot get to the conference room block through our TMC, through our Concur site. We have to go through the conference who has reserved the room block, because it's all pulled and reserved and set to the side. So that's where we have to reserve it from. So we know hotels are tricky. Lainey mentioned something around car rentals, and Shannon, you did too, is sort of a sub tier that we do care about. There's a lot of impacts there, and liability, as you said, Lainey. So car rentals are in the bucket, but I would say airfare. You guys nod, raise your hand. Is airfare the primary mandate component? Okay. Yeah. So yes, to the end user's question, airfare is really the one you can have the most control over. And watch your text in your policies. If you're saying you must use our tools for your booking, give the appropriate exemptions in detail or overarching when possible kind of concept. All right, so to move us through just a little bit, Camilla, I would love if you would talk to us about how your travel program has leveraged your internal connections with your departments, those external partners if appropriate, and then any obstacles that you may have faced.
Yeah, so at the University of San Diego, I've discussed before, we have budget administrators in each department in school, and they really do act as the liaisons between their areas. So they're constitutes, they give us their feedback of any travelers, they highlight the good and the bad so that we know what they're experiencing, any frustrations, and they also communicate anything that we have to. So I've seen like in the chats where people are saying, how do we communicate? We communicate abroad, but sometimes we understand people will either listen to like finances saying something, or on the flip side, they'll listen to their budget administrator that is someone more connected to them. They might respond to that or feel more freely to discuss any frustrations, and then they can be relayed to us. So budget administrators and EAs are a great resource for us. We try to have them as well equipped with any information, tips and tricks, really big open door so that they can reach out to us. We do a lot of one-on-ones. We try to make it as fluid and not as scary when they're asking us questions. I would rather they ask a question or say that they don't know what they're asking, what they're looking for. So that way we can get them the resources and the information that they need. Because if you're new to this traveling or expensing, it can become very daunting, especially if you're a new EA who is responsible for many people. And then throw in the pandemic and it just becomes a nightmare. So we leverage them very well across campus. We worked very closely with our Concur advisory group. And so that had budget admin as well as EAs into that group. And so we use them very frequently to kind of benchmark different things that we're coming up with and then distribute the information. I am under Treasury and Financial Systems, but I work closely with procurement and AP, as well as accounting, just to kind of see the information that we need to relay, and then risk management. So we talked about like car rentals We communicate again the auto insurance portion of it, that it's not required for them to do a rental car, but if they take a personal vehicle, they are personally responsible for anything that happens to their vehicle. So that's something that we try to highlight and be more synergetic with all of our areas. So making sure that we're reiterating what our other departments are also saying in the finance world. And then our budget administrators also let us know how they are administrating their area. So each department, they're very unique. Sometimes they have different internal rules. And so they let us know so that when an employee from their area comes to us for training, we know exactly what to tell them. So it kind of eases the EAs or the budget admin or anyone in their area because we're already touching them. So we want to do as little amounts of reiterating certain things so that they can get the full information together. And then for our external partners, since we are new, we started leveraging some of the spend that we had. We didn't have as well reporting before. So some of us have started different agreements with airlines, and we have local hotels agreements as well. And so that's been very helpful for us, as well as car rentals during this pandemic area. So it has allowed us time to spend more on our travel program to see what are things that we can bring to our travelers, ease their minds whenever we do return to travel. So even though it's considered slow season right now, I think it's giving us time to revisit some of our procedures or revisit different guidelines and things that we've done internally and externally.
Thank you so much for that, Camilla. And thinking about the end of our full travel restriction model as we move into, small ability to travel and then more over time, feels a bit like we're reintroducing our program in some ways and with changes potentially. So let's talk about onboarding new employees, new travelers, infrequent travelers, and managing them. Liz, how do you guys do that at the University of Wisconsin?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things that we do. Some of it that might be unique, worth sharing, but we definitely try to look at the traveler and who they are and kind of target some different things to them. So on our website, we have, individual travel, a new traveler, a conference traveler, groups, people that are traveling in groups, and then international, right? So we kind of try to segment that out so it's a little bit more clear. If you're just someone who's going to just book domestically for a conference, you probably don't need to read everything, right? So we try to target it a little bit as like, who are you as a traveler? And if you're an admin, you're going to need to know a lot more, right? Because you're supporting a bigger a group, or if you're doing anything internationally, there's a whole host of things. And I think that'll probably be the case for quite a while. So we try to look at it that way and try to divide it out into kind of buckets and categories. And that's just been feedback over the years from travelers that don't want to have to weed through all this other information, right? So we've kind of tailored it a little bit more to who they are. We also have tailored our training. So we have different trainings that you can attend, or you can listen to pre-recorded ones. So the nicest thing I'd say about this last year is we've recorded a lot of trainings, we put it on the website, and now we don't have to do all these live trainings as much. So we like it so much, I don't know, we'll go back to some live things, and I still think it'll be great to be in person and hear feedback, but it's really been great to have all these live trainings recorded, and people can go back and listen to them. So we've kind of tailored some of our trainings that way too. So administrative staff have a little bit more in depth and groups. And the other thing that I'd mentioned on the call last time was we also tailor our new hire emails to everyone. So we know that they're getting all the information. So we welcome them, welcome to the University of Wisconsin. So happy to have you. And here's all of our rules, right? So, but we have links, and we make it really nice, and happy to share that out. But we really kind of walk them through all the different, parts of the program. And it's really just to avoid so they don't get stuck in not having to be able to be reimbursed for that airfare. I saw that question come in the Q&A. So we are really harsh on that. So we do have a way to get an exception, but that some campuses really just don't allow it no matter what. And some campuses might allow a one-time exception, but you're going to have to go to a vice chancellor or some higher up, and each of our campuses have it a little bit differently. But we make it quite hard to get an exception on that airfare rule. And because of that, we really try to educate people from kind of day one that that's a really hard rule, and you know you're not going to get reimbursed if you kind of fall outside that. But we really have spent a lot of time on surveying our employees and just doing everything we can to kind of tailor our program so it's as easy for them to follow as possible.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Liz. The consequence, you know, the ultimate consequence is we're not reimbursing you, right? I've seen the ones a little bit up from that, which also came up in the Q&A, which is we will not reimburse you until the trip has completed. We're not going to put funds out there on an airfare you purchased outside of our ticket that we can't manage the unused tickets. And we're not going to reimburse an out-of-pocket spend until you have evidence that you have taken the trip. And then we will pay you. So book it on your own personal card and accept those interest payments for 3 months because we're not reimbursing those. Consequence. So that's one of the elements I've seen. The other is an evidentiary policy. If you book outside of our tools and you're saying it's because you achieved a lower price, you must prove that to us, not with something you gathered today when you're building your expense report. If you did not evidence at the time you booked it, you're under Liz's umbrella of maybe you don't get reimbursed. So bringing that forward in the request modules, making sure they know if they book outside the tool, they must gather the evidentiary information at the start. Those kinds of preemptive teaching policy helps with that. But those are a couple of the upstream consequences I've seen a lot to help stop them booking outside of your programs. And do you guys have any others that you can think of on the phone? Just speak up, group, if you can think of other consequences that they ask for.
I think that's one of our main consequences. We are unique in the sense that we are airfare requirement, but we do highlight like the detectives that want to show the differences. We tell them that it has to be apples to apples. And so they're more than welcome to reach out to CTP and they'll kind of educate them a little more, especially if you're not sure like what exactly it is you're booking. So we address like Expedia, how Google captures their flights. It's like a screenshot, it's not real time, versus like Concur gives you the full rate in the beginning, taxes included. So we do talk about that. And then we educate that as a university, we do not allow basic economy, which is different than economy. So we do address those questions as well as what's the difference between refundable fares and non-refundable fares and what is the expectation from the university. I know that Marie Peterson, who's not on the call today, but she's usually a panelist, at her university, I believe they do allow basic economy. I know some universities do allow that, but they might have some type of liability waiver or consequence saying that you're acknowledging all of the risk that you're taking purchasing this type of ticket, so that they can still get people to adopt. So like Crystal said, all of us are having different cultures and different ways where we can kind of bend. And so this is a great opportunity for you to see like, oh, I like what Liz is doing, or I like what Lainey's doing here, and just kind of build what works for you.
Yeah, thank you. Shannon, so I'm going back to shifting back from consequences. It just came in as part of the Q&A and a good tag on to what Liz was saying about her onboarding and her training. But I did want to talk to you, Shannon, about your onboarding and ongoing training. For those of us that have been in here for a while, CU really innovated a few years ago with some automatic messaging that they generated out of their Concur tool, as well as I'm sure you have some other methods, but we'd love to hear if that's helping.
Yeah, I would definitely say that it does help. We kind of use two different tools. So in order for somebody to get, say, a travel card to use for travel, we have built in a Skillsoft training that has to be taken prior to having that card issued. And in that training, it really is not just about the travel card and the use and the policy regarding the use, but it also speaks directly to travel in general, right? So that's one way that we communicate that information to our travelers. The other way is through our infrequent traveler program. So we've built in some pretty substantial methodology within Concur to message individuals that have never booked travel ever or haven't done it within 12 months. So it's a three-part process. So when the first booking is made, they get a message that says, hey, it looks like you booked a trip. We see you haven't traveled before. Here's some tips and tricks, and here's some links to information for you to learn about travel at the University of Colorado. And then there's a second one. Hey, we see that your trip is coming up. You know, I think it's about 5 or 10 days before the actual trip. And it says, these are things that you need to think about for your trip. And then there's one that when they get back, it messages them again. And it says, hey, we see that you returned from your trip. This is what you need to do, your expense report, for example. So, but, you know, we were seeing that we're losing the initial traveler, right? So the onboarding process. So actually speaking to Liz, we're now working on one more component to that infrequent traveler, and that is the onboarding process, to create an onboarding message that's pushed from Concur, because we're a little bit unique and in the fact that all of our employees are onboarded within Concur. So they're all given a profile when we onboard them as an employee. So that gives us the opportunity to make another messaging that's at that onboarding process that can share the information before they've actually booked the trip. Because at the time that somebody's booked a trip, they could have already done it outside the program, not knowing any better. So the infrequent traveler is only going to hit those people that have booked within the program. It doesn't hit those people that have booked outside the program until they've returned. So using Liz's method there, we're now going to start. Yeah, I mean, this is why we talk, right? We're going to actually extend that to include onboarding, not just what we're seeing as the Skillsoft training.
Yeah, and another option for that, Shannon, the infrequent traveler communication. So Notre Dame did a lot of the actual functional build on it for us, thank goodness, within the network, right? And they shared it with Colorado, who got to massage it a little bit and make it theirs. And the content that Colorado added was super fun, kind of an animated option and a text option, but really, really cool content. Huron now has a copy of that, which Notre Dame and Colorado, of course, shared. And as we developed it with them. And any of you guys can have just here, post this infrequent traveler report into Cognos. Then your job is to complete the HTML text part, put in all your hyperlinks, your fun stuff. You own the content, okay? The report structure is built off the booking tool. It could be modified to be built on the request tool, which CU didn't have an actively utilized request at the time they implemented the infrequent traveler and have added it since. So the idea that you could get these communications bursting based on your travel dates and your request could definitely be a better process and start to encourage and reiterate the need to use your systems for the booking before they get there. So I definitely think there's some always enhancements and modifications and improvements we could add to what we've innovated to make it work a little better. But thanks for that, Shannon. I do think it's a really good way to just in time communicate. And when you've had a year of no travel, we got an opportunity to communicate with everybody. It's just built in. So it's been good stuff. I'm working through Q&A as we go through, so I haven't reserved a terrible amount of time. We're kind of working through the questions as we go. If there's anything I'm missing, please make sure to bring that up. Carolyn, I'm going to stop now and let you talk to us about that as soon as I have you answer one more question, Ms. Shannon. How do you get feedback from your travelers?
We have a pretty robust survey that we put out every year that doesn't just speak to travel, but it speaks to our full Concur system and our TMC. So everyone rates it and provides comments within that. And then we use those comments to really look at what can we do? What are quick wins? How can we make the program on any of our fronts better for our travelers? And then we can use that to push back to our travelers, say, what did we do the last year? Did you like what we implemented last year? To show that we really are listening. So, you know, I would encourage everybody, if you use a survey in the true sense of a survey, to where you're doing the survey, you're analyzing the survey, and you're actually putting it into practice, then a survey works. If you think a survey is a good idea and you put out a survey, you have to be prepared, though, to have actionable items and speak to those actionable items and show your travelers that you are doing and listening and acting on what it is that they're asking of you. So I highly recommend a survey, an annual survey, just to kind of keep your fingers on the pulse of your program.
Yeah, I've gotten to see, Shannon, the benefits of a survey that you follow up on and how engaged people are in giving you feedback year over year because you follow up on it. Versus I've seen the opposite, where universities try to survey, but then there's no follow-up. And the decline in response rate to the surveys over time is significant. They stop telling us if we don't respond to what they're offering to tell us. So just re-emphasizing that if you're going to do a survey, action the thing and communicate how you actioned to your people.
And I
Otherwise,
would
the
say,
surveys
yeah,
start to be of no benefit.
I would say be prepared to spend the time, because anybody that's doing a survey, you need to understand that what you may get back is going to be very time consuming, and you need to be prepared to deal with that time.
To optimize your program, whether it's your policies, your procedure, your technology, your relationships with your partner vendors and suppliers, you have to action it. So it's important. All right. Carolyn, anything we missed out there in the Q&A?
We'll have to answer that, Liz. We'll take over that.
Sorry.
No problem.
I do want to just reiterate while we're looking at that real quick. I saw a great message in the Q&A that's more informational for us, but it was posted from UW Milwaukee campus. The School of Public Health has a winning story about one of their faculty traveling back from China, and his transfer flight was through Narita in Tokyo. If I'm pronouncing that Naruta. I'm going to say that wrong.
Narita.
Tokyo.
Narita.
Thank you, Narita. Thank you, Tokyo. There was a typhoon bearing down, and with a call to the agency, he was able to get the last seat on the flight out of Tokyo. You know, that kind of thing makes a $25, $35 agent fee more than worth its weight in gold. Liz, was that you telling the story? I wasn't sure if that was you.
No, I've just been to Narita, so that's the only reason why I jumped in.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you. I'm like, help me pronounce that. I'm going to say it wrong.
I like this one, Liz. They're wondering about consequences. Again, the difference between a private university and a public university. So I've talked about the private side, but they want to hear a little more about the public side.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difference for us is that we do have a very strict procurement policy. So we've been able to really say, when you're purchasing things such as airfare or, really anything to do with travel, you're still kind of under that umbrella of, procurement and how to purchase things. So for us, really, we do have a very strict rule that we don't reimburse if you booked outside of the program. And there are exceptions, like I had mentioned before, but it's pretty rare. And each kind of campus, so we have 13, four-year institutions, they kind of set their own tone and decide if they're even going to allow exceptions or not. And we're mostly, this is a blanket statement, but we're mostly to the point where we don't allow exceptions anymore because we're so, when I say mature, but we've been doing it for so long. The first few years, you have to really figure that out. You can't expect day one, even year one, even probably year two to have no exceptions to the rule. So I would say that it is an evolution, but I would say we rarely allow it, but we do have a form. And if it's allowed, a form can be filled out and someone can sign it who has that authority, and we will reimburse for that airfare. But we probably do, a handful of those kinds of tickets each year. And that's it. Out of 27 million in there, I'd say we maybe have $5,000 to $10,000 that we spend. So it's almost nothing.
When you make those exceptions, Liz, is there something going on there that says, by the way, you won't get another one?
We don't, because it's really going to be up to that institution and that kind of approver, but it's very rare that they ever go back for seconds, because a lot of times they get denied. I would say 90% of the times they get told no. So I think if they do get told yes, it's so painful that I don't think they would do that mistake again.
Okay.
So we're running out of time. It's 1 o'clock here. I don't know what time it is for everyone else.
No,
Thank you so much, Liz, for moderating this. Is there anything you want to say to everyone closing out? Any questions that we didn't get to, obviously, we're going to post those on SCTM Discuss. So please, keep reading your emails or checking SCTM webpage, and we will be answering those questions for you. And thanks a lot, Liz. You did a great job. Appreciate
Well,
it.
thank everyone. And yes, SCTM Discuss will not only answer your questions, but you guys engage out there. Can't say it enough. The more we engage, the more we learn from each other. Thank you.